Let's move on to this issue now, the state of education following budget cuts that we are seeing across all provinces. The Western Cape faces a loss of over 2,000 teacher posts due to a 3.8 billion rands shortfall. KwaZulu-Natal's situation is even more dire, with just over 11,000 teaching posts potentially affected. To have a chat to talk about this issue, I'm now joined by Basil Manuel, who is the Executive Director of Naptosa. Basil, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time. But it's been a crisis waiting to happen, isn't it?
Good afternoon, Vuyo. Yes, it is so. It has been long in the coming, because if you'd remember that there have been budget cuts in education for a variety of reasons, last year, the year before that, and of course, provinces have managed to sustain the number of teachers. But now the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back has come to haunt us, and provinces are indicating that the kitty is bare. Of course, we do have an argument against it, but the reality is all the provinces are battling to make ends meet.
Talk us through the argument that you have against it.
You see, there's a narrative that says teacher salary increases are too much to handle for the provinces. And we are saying, number one, since 2020, let's just look at what the salary increases have been. 2020, nothing. 2021, teachers got a 1,000 rand or thereabouts as an allowance, not a salary increase. Taken away. 2022, they had the same. 2023 was the first time teachers and public servants as a whole received an increase. That 1,000 rand, which provinces had, was converted to a salary increase of 4.2%. And the real salary increase for 2023 was 3.3%. And that made up about 7.5 as an average. Some got much less. So we haven't had increases. So you can't tell me that provinces budgeted for a zero change to the salary bill. It can't be true. So to now reflect and deflect it to teacher salaries is disingenuous. And to that effect, we've stated that to the provinces, and that is why we called on the DG, we called on the ministry to intervene. We need to talk about this, and we need to look at what the real situation is. When we met last year, towards the end of the year, one of the cries we made was, please protect those departments that have a social outreach nature, like education, like health, like police, etc., because they affect much more than just the personnel that is sitting there. And that is the case with teachers.
But isn't there a, shall we say, bigger issue here of whether we have the numbers of teachers we need for the students we have?
We certainly don't, Vuyo. It stands to reason that the teachers that we currently have, let's take the Western Cape example because people know that already. There's a narrative from the provincial department that, in fact, this is not retrenchment, we're just not renewing the contracts of the temporary teachers. Of course it's retrenchment, because those posts were needed, and those posts were in the post-establishment of schools. That gave a particular class size. Now, as soon as you remove a chunk, and if you think about KZN, it's what nightmares are made of. If you remove those teachers from the system, your class size changes dramatically. And then we ask, is this about teaching or is it about crowd control? We'll add to that the intention to bring in additional subjects so that we start giving children the option of not only the academics, but also the vocational subjects, also the technical subjects, etc. When you think about the 21st century technology subjects, like coding and robotics, when you think about grade R that must come into the system, how, in heaven's name I pray, do you do this whilst you're reducing the teaching staff. This is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for collapse.
But I remember, I mean, this was one of the biggies, one of the big issues in years gone by. But for some reason, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, in more recent years, it has become less and less of an issue. Am I correct?
It's true because we've managed to sustain the numbers. And through some miracle, we've managed to sustain the number of teachers. But there has been also retrenchment by stealth, where provinces were just not replacing teachers that have retired. You just ignore the plea. We know schools, and in KZN, for example, where somebody has gone off on maternity leave. You have to have a replacement, but you just don't get a response. You get a response the week before the teachers to come back. And then they say, but how can we replace somebody that is already coming back to school? Now, that is a retrenchment by stealth, is what we call it. And schools are battling. But let me not make it only about schools. It is also the department itself, because there are many, many posts in our district offices that have not been filled. And that's a hollowed out system. So how do they possibly support the schooling system? We are not thinking for the long term. We are actually planning here for disaster.
So where to from here? Because, I mean,
Well, in
it's
fact,
the Western Cape today, it's going to be KZN tomorrow, it's going to be the Eastern Cape the next day, and, you know.
absolutely. But let me tell you what has happened. The ELRC has informed us, that's the Education Labour Relations Council, that the DG has now managed to put together a meeting of not only the unions under the auspices of the ELRC, but the heads of department from the provinces, the treasury departments, etc., so that we can have a thorough banging out session, so that we can look at what is going wrong, how do we fix it, how do we save posts, how do we save education, because that is the big issue. And that meeting, unfortunately, is only on the 10th of October. We would much rather have had it a little earlier, but we are settling on that for now, whilst we try and see if there's a better date. And hopefully that will give us a way out. In the meantime, we are also saying to teachers, particularly our young teachers who are temporary teachers in the main, and we are saying to them, if you are unsure whether you should be permanent, contact us. Let us look at your conditions, because you can't just summarily be retrenched if you have a right to a permanent post. And then, of course, we are also going to fight every case, because let's not assume that these people are evenly spread. There are some schools that are losing 5 and 6 teachers. And other schools will obviously sit with more than what the allocation is. And we know that moving teachers around takes forever. And yet we need a teacher in front of every class.
But of course, I mean, I remember back in the, shall we say, olden days, 30 years sounds a bit. Anyway, that there was a problem there where many teachers simply didn't want to go where there were vacancies at the time, and this was the cause of many of the big fights that we've seen over the past 30 years.
We are absolutely, because you see, it's not placing people on a piece of paper is not like the reality works, because a finger difference on a map could be a few dozen or even 100 kilometers. So you have to look very carefully at how you move people around. Also, that you can't move somebody from a secondary school into a junior primary post. That is the very, very reason why we have some reading problems, is because there are people out of alignment, people that are unable to teach reading, finding themselves in the junior primary classes. We've got to deal with the real issues. And of course, when we come finally down to the point where if people have to move, we are going to encourage them to do that. But we mustn't be unreasonable too, because people are now going to have to uproot and go and start in another place. Of course, rejection makes you angry, and people feel rejected and become angry.